The streets of Columbus, Ohio, on a biting winter afternoon were a study in contrasts. People bustled along Broad Street, wrapped tightly in their coats, rushing to their destinations with little regard for the city's undercurrent of suffering. I was there, too, but not rushing. I sat on the cold pavement against the wall of an old convenience store, watching the world pass me by. My name is James Miller. And for nearly a year, the streets had been my home. The day-to-day struggle of homelessness strips away much of what makes you feel human. People avert their eyes as they walk by, their silence louder than words. Sometimes, I'd get a few coins tossed in my direction, an acknowledgement that I existed. But barely. Most days, though, I was invisible. Another fixture in the urban landscape. That day, I had my usual spot at the corner of Broad Street and 17th Avenue. My cardboard sign read, "Anything helps. God bless." The words felt hollow after so long, but I held on to the faint hope that someone might pause, even just for a moment. The winter wind cut through my layers of worn clothing, and I adjusted my beanie to keep my ears from freezing. My stomach growled as I eyed the entrance to the convenience store, wishing I had enough for a cup of coffee or even a stale sandwich. As the crowd passed by, I noticed a pair of pristine white sneakers stop a few feet away from me. They were spotless. The kind of shoes you only see on kids who've never had to worry about scuffed soles or wet sidewalks. My eyes traveled upward. The shoes belonged to a teenager, tall, composed, and dressed in a sleek jacket that radiated quiet confidence. His hands were tucked casually into his pockets as he scrolled through his phone, seemingly lost in his own world. There was something about him that caught my attention. It wasn't just his appearance, though he looked every bit the picture of privilege. It was the way he stood, unhurried, as if the chaos of the city didn't touch him. For a moment, I debated whether to speak. Usually, I waited for people to make eye contact first. It felt less humiliating that way. But something told me this boy might be different. I took a breath and forced a smile, even though the cold made my lips crack. "Hey, young man," I called out, my voice raspy. "Can you spare $1?" He stopped scrolling, tilting his head slightly as if to confirm he'd heard me. Then, he turned to face me. His expression wasn't dismissive or annoyed, like I'd seen 100 times before. It was unreadable, calm but intent, and it caught me off guard. "What do you need it for?" he asked, his voice steady but with a hint of curiosity. I wasn't expecting a conversation. Most people either ignored me or threw money my way without a second thought. His question felt different, not accusatory, but genuine. Like he really wanted to know. "Well," I began, rubbing my hands together for warmth. "A cup of coffee would be nice. Maybe a sandwich if I'm lucky." My voice faltered. There was something unsettling about being asked to explain myself. But there was no malice in his tone. Just a quiet seriousness that unnerved me. The boy stepped closer, slipping his phone into his pocket. I could feel the stares of the people around us. Some were stopping to watch, their whispers filling the air like static. It was one thing to see someone like me begging, but it was another to see someone like him stop and engage. "What's your name?" he asked. "James," I said, barely above a whisper. My instinct was to withdraw, to retreat from the intensity of his gaze. But I couldn't look away. "I'm Alex," he replied, crouching down so we were at eye level. His voice carried no arrogance, no superiority, just sincerity. "How long have you been out here?" I hesitated. Sharing my story wasn't something I did often. Most people didn't care about the why, just the spectacle of it. But there was something disarming about Alex. His presence was magnetic, and his demeanor made me feel like I mattered. At least for a moment. "Almost a year," I admitted, swallowing hard. "Lost my job when the plant shut down. My health took a dive after that, and I couldn't keep up with rent. It's been one thing after another since then." The words felt heavy, and I stopped. Afraid of revealing too much? Alex nodded. His brow furrowed in thought. He didn't pity me, he simply listened. And that was more than most people ever did. What about family? He asked. The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I shook my head, my jaw tightening. Don't have much of that anymore. My folks are gone. And my brother, I chuckled bitterly. We haven't talked in years. I guess when you lose everything, it's easier for people to let you go. Alex didn't respond immediately. He just watched me, his expression serious. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket. My pulse quickened. I'd asked for $1. But the way his hand moved told me this wasn't just spare change. When he pulled out a crisp $100 bill, I blinked in disbelief. Here, he said, extending it toward me. This should cover more than coffee. My hands shook as I took the money, staring at it like it might disappear. Are you serious? I managed to ask. Why would you do that? Because I can, he said simply, shrugging as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Then he leaned closer, his voice dropping. But this isn't just about the money. I want you to promise me something. What's that? I asked, gripping the bill tightly. His gaze was unwavering. If I help you today, you've got to help yourself tomorrow. Deal? For the first time in years, someone wasn't just giving me a handout, they were giving me a challenge. The words hit harder than I expected. And all I could do was nod. Good, Alex said, standing back up. And go to this address tomorrow morning. They'll help you out. Tell them Alex sent you. He handed me a torn piece of paper with an address scribbled on it. As he walked away, I sat there clutching the note and the money, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. The next morning, I stood outside the address Alex had written on the piece of paper. It was a modest brick building on a quiet street. Its entrance marked by a simple sign, Hope Outreach Resource Center. I hesitated. The note crumpled slightly in my hand. The $100 bill Alex had given me was still in my pocket. Untouched. I couldn't bring myself to spend it yet. It felt like more than just money, it was proof that someone, for once, believed in me. The people filtering in and out of the building looked like they belonged. Some carried bags of groceries. Others chatted quietly. I felt like an outsider, standing there with my layers of worn clothes and weathered face. My instincts told me to walk away. But Alex's words rang in my ears. If I help you today, you've got to help yourself tomorrow. Taking a deep breath, I stepped through the door. The warmth inside was a stark contrast to the biting cold I'd left behind. The faint hum of conversation and the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. A middle-aged woman behind the reception desk greeted me with a warm smile. She had kind eyes. The kind that made you feel like you weren't being judged. Can I help you? She asked. I hesitated, unsure of how to explain myself. Finally, I slid the crumpled note across the counter. Alex sent me, I said, my voice low. Her eyes flicked to the paper, and her smile widened. You must be James. We've been expecting you. She stood and motioned for me to follow. Come on. Let's get you started. I didn't know what to expect. But what followed felt like a whirlwind. A caseworker named Diane sat me down in her small office and asked about my story. Her tone was calm and understanding. With no hint of pity, I told her about losing my job, my health issues, and how I'd ended up on the streets. It was the first time in years that someone had listened without cutting me off or looking at me like I was broken beyond repair. Diane outlined a plan, a temporary bed in their shelter, a doctor's appointment to check on my health, and a spot in a job training program. It all sounded overwhelming. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't drowning. Someone was helping me float. By the end of the day, I was lying on a cot in the shelter, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced as I replayed the events of the past 24 hours. Alex's act of kindness. The people who had helped me here. The sense that maybe, just maybe, I could claw my way out of this hole. I clutched the $100 bill in my pocket as I drifted off to sleep, feeling lighter than I had in years. This was the first step. And for once, I believed it wouldn't be the last. The days that followed were a whirlwind of small but significant changes. At the shelter, I was treated with a kindness I hadn't felt in years. The staff didn't just see me as another homeless man, they saw potential. Even when I couldn't see it myself. Diane, my caseworker, met with me daily to ensure I stayed on track. It was overwhelming at first. But the structure gave me a sense of purpose. Something I hadn't felt since I lost my job. The medical checkup was my first hurdle. Years of neglect had taken a toll on my body. And the doctor didn't sugarcoat it. I had to make changes, better nutrition, regular medication, and eventually, physical therapy. It was daunting. But Diane helped me set manageable goals. One step at a time, she reminded me. Her calm voice a steady anchor. The job training program was next. I wasn't sure what to expect when I walked into the classroom. But I was greeted by a group of people just like me. We were all there for the same reason, to rebuild. The instructors were patient, teaching us everything from resume writing to interview skills. For the first time, I started to believe that maybe I could contribute to society again. One evening, as I sat in the common room of the shelter, a staff member approached me with a curious expression. "James," she said, holding out her phone. "You need to see this." On the screen was a video. At first, I didn't recognize it. But then the scene came into focus. Alex crouched down in front of me, handing me the $100 bill. The audio was faint, but I could hear snippets of our conversation. My face, weary and defeated, filled the screen. It was surreal watching myself like that, as if I were a stranger. "It's gone viral," the staff member said, her voice filled with awe. "Millions of people have seen this." I didn't know how to feel. Embarrassment washed over me first, my lowest moment laid bare for the world to see. But then, as I read the comments under the video, another emotion crept in: gratitude. People weren't mocking me, they were inspired. They praised Alex for his kindness and expressed hope that I would find my way. The video sparked a movement. Social media was flooded with stories of people performing small acts of kindness, tagging them with hashtags like #KindnessChallenge and #PayItForward. Donations poured into shelters across the country, including Hope Outreach. The building that had given me my first break was now expanding its programs, helping more people like me. Alex remained quiet throughout the media frenzy. He declined interviews and avoided the spotlight. But his actions spoke louder than words. Behind the scenes, he ensured the shelter received the resources it needed. To him, this wasn't about fame, it was about making a difference. As I lay in my cot that night, I realized how much had changed in such a short time. A single act of kindness had not only given me hope but had rippled outward, touching lives far beyond my own. It was humbling and motivating. I vowed to keep moving forward, to honor the trust Alex had placed in me, and to prove to myself that I was worth the effort.